All right, welcome everybody to the Vic Lombardi Prostate Cancer Podcast. Pleased to be joined by former Broncos punter. Man, I'm old enough to remember your playing days. And I don't want to age you, but I'm aging myself. Bucky Dilts, everybody. Bucky, welcome.
Nice to be here.
You're wearing your Georgia Bulldog shirt. You played your college football at Georgia. Now that Georgia's good,
Yep.
You guys are wearing your apparel.
That's right. This is recently purchased about a year ago, and you could ask my son. I wear it probably far too often.
So your real name, because I know you as Bucky, Douglas Riggs Dilts.
Yes.
When did you become Bucky?
When I was a little kid, my brother John wasn't able to say Douglas, and somehow Douglas turned into Duck, and then Duck Buck, and then Buck, and then Bucky, and that was it. It's a horrible story, but when I started playing football, I didn't want to be Douglas. You know, the only person that ever called me Douglas was my mom.
Sure.
And once I got Bucky and I started playing football, that was it.
Plus, Bucky sounds like a football name.
Right.
So, help me out here. I remember vividly watching that 77 team. Were you on the Super Bowl 77 team?
Yes.
The one that beat the Raiders in the AFC title game where they took the crossbars down, they took the field goal post and marched them down Federal?
And we also had a big parade in downtown Denver that probably not the size of what the other guys got when they won, but I'd have to say that our 77 team is what really put Denver on the map.
I tell people this all the time. You know, you have championship teams that have gone through this town in many sports. You've had Super Bowl teams. The most important team to ever play sports in Denver from a native is that 77 team because it introduced the nation to the city of Denver. We were always a flyover city. Denver always lost and everything. We didn't have any sport to lean on. And all of a sudden the Broncos arrived under Red Miller and your outfit, and we became a legit go-to place.
I tell you, I look at the guys that come through in a Ring of Fame, Hall of Fame guys, and I look at Floyd Little.
Yeah.
It's amazing what that guy did with the teams he was
The
with.
franchise. They called him the franchise.
Oh, he was. I mean, I don't know how he did it, but he was really something.
All right, we'll talk more about your athletic exploits, but the reason you're here is because you are a fellow prostate cancer survivor.
Yes.
How old were you? How did you find out?
Yeah, I was fortunate. My dad told me that he had prostate cancer and got the radioactive seeds, and he instructed me that, hey, you need to start checking your blood and looking for PSA numbers. And so I started that when I was about 56, and about 2 or 3 years later, my PSA spiked. It just jumped up to 4.4. And so when I was talking to the doctor up in Boulder, he goes, you got options here. It's not the end of the world. It's 4.4. You can do watchful waiting if you want to see where this goes for a little bit. You can do a biopsy. All these options that I could do. And I said, if I even think I've got cancer, I'm doing a biopsy.
I'm with you. It's funny. You're an athlete. I think like an athlete when it comes to stuff like this. You want to be aggressive.
Yeah.
You want to be. So how many years ago was this that you were diagnosed?
I was diagnosed 10 years ago.
10 years. Okay.
And
And
the operation happened. This will be my 9th year of being clean.
So your dad has it. It's in the family. You know it's out there. You're checking your PSA. Your PSA spikes. How long thereafter, then, after that PSA spike, did you decide to go biopsy and everything?
I biopsied just before the end of the year, and then I went on my search of what I wanted to do. Once I got the biopsy back, and there were 2 samples that were positive for cancer. I think my Gleason was 3 + 4, 7.
Okay, so 7.
7, and the guy says, "Well, you don't have to panic."
That's
you
that borderline. See, mine was a 9. Mine was like go.
Well,
yours was more.
Well, it's interesting because after I did get the surgery, and they kind of post-op
the pathology.
I was a 4 + 5. So there you are. So it was moving on its way, and it was on the left side of my prostate. So anyway, I come back and I go like, okay, I had a guy in my office who had surgery with Dr. Crawford, and he says, this is a good way to go, but a lot of people are starting to do robotic surgery. So I went to see a guy named Eigner. Are you familiar with him? He's a big robotics guy down in South Denver.
Heard that name.
Has done most of them, and he was doing so many of them. Eventually, they got the machines and brought it over to University of Colorado because he was getting a lot of business, and they said, we got to go this way. So I went and visited with Eigner. He says, this is a little less mess. You don't wear the catheter for as long. All the kind of positive things about the blood and everything. And I'm like, well, maybe I'll do this. I finally came back and said, it's still a robot. I want a guy on me doing this thing.
Freak you out a little bit.
Yeah. And so I came back and I said, I'm going to do traditional surgery.
Sure.
And that's when I went with Dr. Crawford. And I tell you, I went through that whole process. You're just glad to get it done and get it removed. But then you get out of the hospital and you're sitting there, you're there with a catheter for a week to 2 weeks. And most of the time I was by myself, and I'm
Mind starts racing.
It starts going all over the place. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And I just said, I want to, first of all, see the end result of this thing.
Yeah. And
then what do I need to do after that? So they came back to me and said, got everything out, but you have positive margins. Okay. So I said, well, how bad is that? And in the report you look at, there's a very small part of my nerves that were spared in the surgery that have some cancer. And they said, again, you have options. So you can just watch this thing. You could get radiation. You can get, what was it? I can't think of it. It started with an L, a big shot you could get. Lupron.
Zap those nerves with the positive margins. Is that what they wanted to do? Get rid of them there.
That's kind of what they said. But they said, you don't have to do that right now. Okay. It's not like the end of the world and you got to do it right now. They were really pushing the Lupron back then.
Yeah.
Though. And I said, and then I said, what are the effects of that? And I said, well, it kind of dulls things down. And I said, well, that's not the whole reason I got the nerve sparing surgery in the first place. So I said, I'm just going to leave this alone for a while and watch it. My PSA was very low. It was like 0.01 when I was done. And then it stayed that way for a while. So I said, I'm just gonna kind of let this go. I'm not going to freak out. And I have let it go for 9 years. So I went back, got another checkup. And this time, because I wanted to get a different opinion, I went back to Eigner and I said, what do you think of all this? And I took them all my paperwork from CU about what they told me to do. They wanted me to get zapped.
They suggested, yeah.
And they wanted me to do the shot. They wanted me to do all this stuff, and you're going back to all these departments, and what are the codes and all this? And I'm like, no, man, I just want to get away from this. So anyway, Eigner comes out, and he goes, you didn't listen to what they told you to do, which was good advice, but you're lucky because your blood has done virtually nothing in the last 9 years. He goes, you're one lucky son of a gun.
Yeah.
So now when I come back from that, this is just recently, and I come back and I go like, I am a lucky guy. So I saw your video and I saw the things that you did for what you were going through. And I said, he's really taking care of himself and doing some really good stuff. You changed your diet, dropped the sugar, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I don't do any of that. I need to have a 65-year-old correction here. So I gotta say, you really inspired me. I just looked at 2 videos.
Yeah.
With the one with you and Crawford, and then when you were talking about what you're doing with your diet and everything. And I said, first of all, there's a lot of things that are new that I don't know about. Second of all, I don't have a very good diet, and I should. And it's not that tough to do. Yeah. So at least not to me. So
well, it's flattering to hear you say that, and we'll delve into that a little bit more. But I want to backtrack a little bit because I want to go back to your surgery. Most of the people I've spoken to during this podcast had the robotic because it's the standard practice.
Right.
You went with the old. I don't want to call it old, but the manual that's cut across the abdomen. Is that the way? How did it take place?
Yeah, I mean, they came in, they explained everything I was going to do, and I got to tell you, because your mind's kind of racing at that stage. Like I know I'm about to get knocked out. They've got 10 students around the table looking at you, all this, and I said, hey, Dr. Crawford, you're doing this, right? Not any of these guys. You're doing the surgery, right? Oh yeah, Bucky, don't worry, And so then the next thing I know, I got knocked out, and I got up, and you got the catheter and everything else, and the. I was in the hospital. I actually stayed in the hospital for a kind of an extra day.
Sure.
I just wanted to make sure everything's okay, right? And then I went home, but it was tough for me when I got home, because you look at the scar, you look at the catheter, and it's almost like not only was I sick, but you feel like you got older or something.
Exactly,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. See, that's when it's funny you bring that up. When you have all those parts dangling and you're cut up that's when you feel like, well, I have cancer.
Yeah.
This is cancer. When all that stuff goes away and you're back to yourself, it's you don't have those accoutrements hanging out. You don't feel like you have cancer anymore.
I see the little scar, but it's like I just don't even pay attention to it.
Was your catheter in place for a couple weeks?
Almost 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay, 2 weeks. Yeah,
and I'll say this. That's one of the greatest reliefs to get that taken out of you.
Tell me about it. It's the number one.
If you wanted to torture someone and get them to talk, that would be a way to do it.
Well, to me, my surgery was a breeze.
Yeah.
I slept. That was the best sleep I've had. 4 hours of sleep in my life. I got up. I was in no pain. I did not use any of the opioids and none of the Vicodin. I never needed it. Never used it. I went through that. The part that got me was before surgery and after surgery. Right up here, getting on the internet. Well, you said idle time. You're sitting in bed. I'm always out doing something. So I don't think I've ever spent that much time in bed in my life. So all you do is think about what's next. Let's talk about that, because you said you really lean on the mental hurdles that are involved with
yeah,
this.
because whether people want to admit this or not, you go through a lot of anxiety about it. I have anxiety problems anyway.
Yes, so do I.
And I suffered some depression, and I have
it's in my family as well.
History of mental health issues in my family. My sister passed away from suicide, and my mother-in-law did too. So we were surrounded by that. But you kind of take account of your life, where it's at, where it's going to go. And then you always have something a little negative in the back sometimes at work, like maybe this won't go the right way, or I'm not the same person I was before, or any of that kind of stuff. And that kind of works on you for a while. But I had that for a couple days, and then I just wanted to get up and get going. I didn't want to sit around and mope about my situation. It was done. The surgery was successful. I wanted to get the darn catheter out of me and get going. That's all I really wanted.
How long before you were active after surgery? Because the robotic surgery for me, it was pretty quick. I mean, I was running 3 weeks later. I was biking a month. I mean, I was fine.
I was exercising. I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks later.
Okay, so you handled it pretty nicely.
But I would go out on walks and stuff.
Sure.
The big thing was getting the catheter out. After that, I was like, I'm back.
What about the incontinence issues?
That went on for a bit. I do have one story that was kind of scary because when they take the prostate out, they have to re-sew or reconnect the
bladder or the urethra.
Urethra, and so I was sitting there, and I can't tell you exactly how far along I was. This was after the catheter was out, but I walked up to go to the bathroom once, and nothing was going on.
Yeah.
Like you're kind of straining, and nothing is going on, and then I really strained, and all of a sudden it came out, and there must have been some residual clog or something. It came out, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy. I thought for instance I couldn't do anything, right? Yeah. So I go back down to them again, and they run a tube down you to like kind of make sure you're reopened to your bladder and everything again. And they said, hey Bucky, you see this thing we just did with you? You're going to be doing that for the next 2 or 3 weeks to make sure this path is good.
Oh, wow.
So I would do that every morning, where I would this long, and you put
like
it all
floss.
Yeah.
Floss your urethra.
I'm sure I'm not the first or last one to do that, but I'm like, it was kind of weird to be doing that, but I'm like, this is really good for me. The tube is working. I'm going to the bathroom.
Well, I joke about it now, and I have no problems talking about it either. I'm 6 months removed from surgery, and I don't really have any incontinence issues. I don't use pads. I sleep well, but occasionally I'll dribble. I'll leak. I go run. I went running with my brother one day, and I get back. I'm like, I just peed myself. It just randomly just happens. Well, it doesn't bother me.
Underwear and shorts are a lot better than they were back even when I got the surgery. So there's all kinds of stuff for that now. They advertise it for women all the time, but they don't for guys. I don't know why that is. But
I mean, it's not the primary concern. Put it that way. It's just not the primary concern for me. Beyond the sexual dysfunction, the incontinence issues, is always that nugget in the back of your head: will it come back? And here you are, almost a decade removed, and it has not come back. Right. And you consider yourself lucky.
Not cured, lucky.
Exactly.
And now, after seeing you guys with this podcast and what you're doing and what the work you're doing, and I see guys in much more difficult situations that are managing their cancer well. I need to put a little bit of work back in Bucky, because I haven't done the job I could do with it. And so I'm going to go back to see you and visit with them. And after hearing you and what you're doing with your diet, it wouldn't hurt me to drop 20 pounds.
How often do you get tested now?
I test my my blood twice a year. They used to tell me, just do it once a year, no big deal. I will never not test.
I wish I could do it every day. I know it does you no good. I'll do it by the hour if you want me to.
No, I initially when I was down, I would do it 3 times a year. Then I went to 2, and I just.
Where do you go to get tested?
I just go up to Boulder Community Hospital. I got a practicing guy up there, but I've already set up with them the type of test I needed when I talked to Crawford. Them saying make sure it has these things in it, and so that's what I do. But the thing about it is, it's still that 0.0 whatever
0.01 less than.
Right, but what I have to do is it occasionally ticks up a little bit, and you go like, okay, I need to pay more attention to this. So that's why I want to go back.
What does it tick up to? I'm curious.
I can fluctuate anywhere between 0.04 to 0.05.
Interesting. So it moves.
Just a little bit, but my diet's not the best.
Yeah.
Somebody once told me that when you do those tests, I don't know if anxiety has anything to do with
anxiety, if there's any irritation.
So there's all these factors, but the thing is, it stayed in this level, right? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not doing the most proactive things I could do. You never
feel cured.
No.
And you know what? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What bothers me about this cancer, there's 2 things. People say, well, if you're going to get cancer, get prostate cancer. As if it's nice cancer.
The easy one, right?
The other thing that bothers me is, you're cured because you're undetectable. You're never cured.
No.
You're never cured. This can always pounce again.
And you know what else? When you hear people talk about survival rates, that's a whole other discussion.
Were you ever given, see, those numbers scare the hell out of me because, you've been given, you got to.
It was a 5-year or
Yeah, 5-year, 27% chance. Then you got these mathematical I don't like numbers.
I don't like math. I don't like numbers as small as 5.
Yeah. All right. So you go back periodically. You get your PSA checked.
Yep.
Your Gleason score upon pathology was a 9. Did they ever give you indication what your chance of reoccurrence was at that point? Did they say high, low, medium?
Low is what's in the report that I have, and it also said about the margin where it was located. They ran tests on like lymph nodes and all the other things around it. All those came up negative with the exception of that
one margin
that
in your
one
nerves.
Margin. And so I think I can go back there. Now, I'm sure they have some kind of scan or test where they could see that margin, right?
Well, they've developed so many different scans over the years that, I've talked to these doctors about them, such, high-profile magnified scans. They get bigger and bigger, able to see more and more.
I would be in favor of doing that and zapping it.
And that's the thing, and I try and get that in people's heads when people wonder, how should I approach this? Should I sit and watch or should I be aggressive? It depends who you are. It depends how old you are. It depends how you live your life. I want to live my life a certain way, so I don't want to. I don't want to get to that point where I have to be taking injections all the time and having to lose muscle mass and having. I don't want that. I want to live like I live. So I'm going to do other things like change my diet.
Right.
Be much more proactive if I see anything. So let's talk about your diet a little bit, because I know that being a former athlete.
I'm an avid craft beer drinker.
Yeah. Okay.
So I like Belgian style ales to be particular. I still mess around with bread and starch, and I don't eat any red meat. I do a lot of fish and chicken, but I'm sloppy with what I do. And the one big thing that I heard from you is you basically got rid of sugar.
Yeah, and I don't want to dramatize it by saying all sugar. I still eat fruit.
Right.
Fruit's got sugar in it. I still drink wine.
Right.
Wine's got sugar in it. I just stay away from the granulated. I used to take my coffee in the morning, Bucky, 4 cups of coffee, and I'd just be like
Turn
this,
it over.
right? Diet Coke, some fake sugars.
Yeah.
I stay away from anything resembling sweets. I don't eat cake. I don't eat cookies anymore. Desserts do not exist in my world.
Right. Well, then, and that's the way I want to become, because I'm sitting here thinking my body's done a pretty good job of keeping this thing in check, right? So why am I not doing a better job of feeding my body or creating an environment for my body to do better all the time, right? And to where it doesn't become this ongoing worry.
Could work. It could. Everybody's different.
I would feel better if I was doing more things that were proactive. Is what I'm saying.
What have the doctors told you about it?
I haven't really had a. That's what I mean. I want to go back to see you and sit down. I don't even know if Crawford's still there. If he
Crawford's on a consulting basis, but I've talked to David. They have, I would suggest this: you go to the doctor, and now you can do gene testing. You can do, they've got this thing where I did it, where they test your DNA essentially to see if you're prone for certain diseases.
Right.
I met with a nutritionist at CU Health, a dietitian. Here are the foods that are more apt. Here are the foods that are scary. And again, a lot of this is want to. A lot of this is, do you have to? No. Moderation is key. But I like to have that stuff in order. I just do. And it sounds to me like, red meat, I got rid of red meat. Is it these
I grew up in the South.
Exactly.
It was fried foods and all the best.
Well, I grew up in an Italian family. I ate cheese I had to give up.
Well, cheese, I still have cheese. I want to dump that. I don't know what to do with like dairy. Like, don't do this, do this.
Yeah.
So I need some education.
Sure. And we all do. And I don't think there's a foolproof method, because I firmly believe there are those who say, well, you can beat this just by, your diet and exercise. No, you can't. You need medicine.
Right.
And then there are those who say, you don't need to worry about your lifestyle, just the medicine will work. No, you don't. I think you need both. I think it's a dose of both. And that's what I've tried to apply. And it's whatever's worked for you, it has, because you're 9 years removed. Okay, so you are now 65?
Yep.
65. How old was your uncle passed from prostate cancer?
He passed at 82, where he didn't address any of it. He said he was going to get the seeds and do all these things. He never did. Then it finally metastasized, and then he was out. And that was at 82.
Your father?
Father passed away 84 from sepsis, though, not from the cancer.
So where was the cancer at that point? Was it?
He said he didn't have any problem with it, because every time he went to get checked with the seeds, he was fine. And if you do that, that's kind of what they were doing for people that were older.
Sure.
When they found out about it as well, I'll just give you radioactive seeds, contain it, and move on. Because you know how it is. If they checked everybody at the end of their lives, you'd find most guys have. Yeah.
Exactly right. Well, that's what's crazy about it. This disease is getting younger.
Yeah.
It's getting younger. I feel like I'm still 20 years old. I am like I didn't know what a prostate was. At least you had it in your family. You had some knowledge of what it was. I didn't even know what it was at the time.
I imagine you could ask most males out there what a prostate, and they'd all flunk.
No clue. And most males don't understand that 1 out of 9 are carrying this disease, and they don't know it. 1 out of 9 males are carrying prostate cancer.
Well, and it's difficult for guys to sit around and talk about that. So, I got involved with that Pints for Prostate deal that comes up at the Beer Fest.
Well, you're a beer drinker.
Yeah, and I poured at the Beer Fest. I did Pints for Prostate for like 5 years in a row. Always worked it. Put some stuff got some Broncos stuff in the auction they did.
Yeah.
And then last year or two, I've been away from it, but I could always get with the people from Education Council, and they could get me back into that if I want to do it. But I went there. This was like 3 years ago. And there's a guy from the Raiders named Ben Davidson who
remember Ben Davidson.
Up. Big linebacker, big handlebar.
Oh, yeah. He was fearsome.
And he came to us. I said, hey, Ben, I'm a cancer survivor too. How you doing? Oh, Bucky, yeah, this is great. And we're sitting there drinking beers together. And I came back the next year, and he was gone because he died. So he wasn't fine.
Of prostate cancer?
Yep.
And did it metastasize within a year?
I think probably when I saw him the first time, it was already going on. His wife was with him, and they were there promoting it, and then he was gone. So
scares the hell out of you, doesn't it?
Well, in most of the cases that I've seen where I see guys pass away from this, they're early to mid 50s or in their 60s, and they just didn't address it, and all of a sudden it's too far gone, and you can't, my ex-wife kind of went through the same thing. I was married for 20 years. Got a divorce in 2000, and then in 2004, she came down with cervical cancer and passed away in 2006 from cervical cancer. Though that's a curable cancer. Yeah. She just wasn't watching what she was doing.
You hear those stories, and this is why we do what we're doing right now.
Yep.
It pays to be aggressive. It pays to think like an athlete and compete against this.
And I don't know about you, but a lot of times when I come out and if I talk about prostate cancer, or if somebody knows I have it, people don't talk to you directly. They come back around to you later and say, hey, Bucky, I had a guy call me on the phone the other day because I told him I was meeting with you. Yeah. It was about prostate cancer, and he's a real estate guy.
I don't understand why.
And he called me back later, and it was all about, hey, well, tell me about this prostate cancer.
Why are people so freaked? I mean, cancer's cancer. I don't care if
I
I
know.
had cancer in my nipple.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care where. Why are people freaked out about where it's located?
I don't know. I guess it's a private area and they don't want to. I don't know.
I mean, it'll get to you eventually. It'll get to you. Now, does it affect you differently than lung cancer? I guess. But to me, cancer is cancer. And that's what bothers me about prostate cancer. It's an old man's disease. It travels slowly. Don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
I hear that word, man. You need to worry. But I don't want to, listen, we talked about your situation. I want to ask you about the 77 and the Orange Crush and the Broncos because I grew up in this town, Bucky, and you guys were everything to me and everybody in this town where everybody wore orange and that team was so special. What happened in the Super Bowl?
I think that was
besides 8 turnovers.
8 turnovers. And you know what? If you go back and look at that game, our defense played their ass off in that game.
8 turnovers and it was still a game.
But we just, Morton had a horrible day.
Yeah.
I know my first punt got fumbled down on the 1 and we didn't get it back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all the things that typically would be breaks for us would work for us. Mm-hmm. And in the case of Craig, there's just no time, man. He was so beat up from Oakland, and he had.
Wasn't he in the hospital?
Oh, for like a week. I think Morton was really the reason why you had to start reporting injuries when it had to do with gambling.
Really?
Because they kept it so quiet, nobody knew what was going on, and Vegas didn't know what was going on.
What was Morton's injury?
He had a humongous bruise on his thigh. He couldn't even walk. And it was just something where Craig was the kind of guy who
like a hematoma is what they would call it.
Yeah. It's just all blood. And I got hit once and actually had one on my forearm once. But it was just the nastiest looking thing. And he really couldn't do anything. He wouldn't even come out and practice. And then he showed up, and he played.
Was that back when they only had 1 week off before the Super Bowl, or did you guys have 2?
No, I think we only had 1.
Okay.
And then we were down there, and I've been to New Orleans the year before because Georgia played in the Sugar Bowl.
Sure.
We lost to that. Dorset was with Pittsburgh, and we lost to them. I had to punt like 10 times in that game, but I was just giving them more room to run, But when we got down there, I think everybody had a good time. We enjoyed it. We didn't stay in a nice hotel. It was kind of a flea bag hotel.
Yeah.
But it was a good time. I think it's one of those cases where, first time guys there, they're enjoying themselves. And if you go back and look at the 77 Broncos, particularly when it came to offense, it was pretty patched together what we were doing with those guys.
It was almost like the Super Bowl 50 Broncos. The offense didn't carry the team.
No. And we were always thinking on our punt team, we got to cause a turnover. Mm-hmm. I want someone to fumble a punt or whatever. And usually we would get those kind of results. And so if we could create a turnover, the defense is going to put them in a good situation where it's like plus 50. They got a good chance to score then, right? But if we get way backed up and stuff, you want us to go 80, 75 yards. No, that's not going to happen most of the time.
Was Alzado just crazy?
Yeah.
Crazy person?
I'll tell you the story about him. I was in one day lifting weights, and it was just Lyle and myself.
Wait, punters lift weights?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I the test I used to have for like body weight, and I do my body weight like 32 times or something like that. And because you gotta show up somehow, right? Sure. So I'm in there, and Lyle's in there, and I don't know how many plates he had on these. Hey, Bucky, come over and spot for me. I said, are you freaking kidding me? You really think I could do anything if you dropped this? And he goes, and so he went and did it. And he's just like fighting this thing up. I said, Lyle, you got to get this thing up there, man, or we're both dead. And he did, but he was a different guy. Really kind of really a big personality, big on the field. But, when you went away socially, he wasn't around us very much.
Yeah, well, that team was, to me, it's like the Beatles, man. Some of the names from that squad.
Yeah. Well, they got to get Gradishar.
Oh,
they got to get him in.
The fact that guy played a decade and had as many tackles as he had. Oh. He was all over the football field.
And I mean, tackles. Third and short, you weren't getting anything from him.
Louis Wright was on that team. Correct?
Yes,
Louis Wright's another guy. To me,
Louis still looks like he could play. Unbelievable.
I saw him about a year ago. 6'4".
Yeah.
Svelte. He was like the first big corner, the tall corner.
But he was the best guy at, you would think, oh man, he's beaten. Then he would just recover out of nowhere, leap up and either make a pick or swat the ball away. He was just great.
Yeah. Well, it was fun to watch that team. It was fun to reminisce with you about that team. But more importantly, man, I'm glad to know that you're aware that this disease. You never know when it's going to strike again. So
Yep.
I hope this helps. I
No,
hope it helps everybody watching.
No, you've impacted me with this over the last 2 or 3 weeks, so it's good, and I'm gonna dive a little deeper into this.
How do
now.
you think the Dogs will finish this year?
I think they'll be good.
I like your quarterback, man.
Well, he ran off 2 guys that are playing elsewhere,
Yeah.
so that's the way it is in college football. You have 2 guys that can play, somebody's going to leave, and they're doing pretty well away from there. But they're good. They got Swift, that running back, is a great running back, and if he's healthy, he's as good as anything they've had. So I don't know. I think they'll win the East, and then they play whoever comes out of the West again, I guess.
September is Prostate Cancer Awareness Month, and there's a reason you need to be aware. 1 in 9 of you watching this program right now have prostate cancer. You just don't know it. For Bucky Dilts, I'm Vic Lombardi. We'll see you next time.